Hey everybody, this is Petey from the Spinner Rack, and today I'm going to do a little video connecting the comic books to the No Way Home, right? So if the thumbnail for this, you will see a character that's from the Incredible Hulk, the Shaper of Worlds. That's going to hint to you what the original plan was when Marvel was trying to figure out something to sort of, let's go back a little bit, right? So there's always the draw to the early Spider-Mans. So I think Kurt Busiek had decided to sell Marvel and doing a story. There was something that John Byrne had kind of pitched to Marvel to do a continuing series of Spider-Man while he was in high school, right? He had pitched him to that, and they kind of said no. But when Kurt Busiek was pretty hot, not in any connection to Byrne, he came to them and said, hey, we should do some untold tales that happen in between the other stories, and we'll connect them into continuity. And Marvel said yes. So they came out with Untold Tales of Spider-Man. Now, this series is a well-loved series, though the success of it only lasted 25 issues. So I'm not sure about the sales on this. It has a great Pat Olive as the artist early on in his career. Kurt Busiek post, what's that thing? What did he do? Marvels. We have this thing of doing something that should work, right? So this is going to play to everything that we've been seeing in the Spider-Man movies. They're trying to get the teen Spider-Man out here, right? So this was a fun series, but in my mind, it kind of stuck too far to continuity, trying to fit everything in to the rest of the continuity that was going on, but at the same time, it kind of rushed. The Spider-Man is up to speed by 25, where he's basically bouncing around. Who's that guy? He's bouncing around the Green Goblin, and it's not much of a fight. Similar to this sort of thing, where Spider-Man is kind of really up to speed already, even though, this guy's held his own for a little while. Spider-Man figured the classic Marvel water tank scene to take out the villain, right? And he has the Todd McFarlane web still, right? So this one had a little bit of a buzz. I guess it had a lot of stuff going for it. But I guess the pros would have to say why it only lasted 25 issues. It had Roger Stern co-writing it. And ultimately, this series ended, right? But Marvel still had the bug. This was in 95 when this was introduced. So Marvel had also experienced Heroes Reborn. And that, even though it was critically destroyed, was a success. So in two ways, Marvel would try to capitalize on this. They were like, well, maybe Rob and Jim had the right idea and did it the wrong way, right? And they also say that Bill Jemas considered himself the guy who killed Jim Lee taking over Marvel. But he, of course, we all know he had the idea for Ultimate Spider-Man, which was a reboot, right? So with that said, we know what's coming. We have Chapter 1, which would be sort of a soft reboot of Spider-Man, kind of, getting more attention back to him, trying to go back to what happened in the past and kind of streamline what had happened in the past for the present day, right? So this one has gotten attacked many a times, and we're not going to do a full overview of Chapter 1, but before we got to Chapter 1, we had something called The Gathering of the Five, which Norman Osborn would have this big plot which would lead to the final chapter with Spider-Man fighting, for the moment of fighting Norman Osborn, and some new characters that would be introduced and brought to Spider-Man universe, right? So not just Norman Osborn, but a couple other characters, right? But that wasn't their original plan. The original plan was to actually reboot Spider-Man, to actually put him in the teenage stage and say this would be the present day. And that's why the Shaper of Worlds was in there. That Spider-Man would basically go through a whole bunch of trials, the negative things happening to him, and he would put out a wish saying, I wish that I could go back to high school. And basically, if you go to Amazing Spider-Man 7, we have a story where we don't go back all the way back to high school, but we go back to a different sort of thing. So they didn't get to do that story. They decided it was too cosmic for Spider-Man. So they went with the soft reboot, and what's left over from the story is do a story where, they would find themselves in a brand new world, or something called a perfect world, right? Something's happened and this is one of the cool things in his Burns run on Spider-Man is some of the wide shots that he was doing. It's like really some cool stuff here. Like Scott Hanna, the ink's a little bit. I guess he's inking breakdowns, which is, having a hard time. He's having a hard time dealing with it. And you see Dan Green would do a lot better job with this stuff. But I think Scott Hanna's more of a finisher, not really an inker, not really a finisher. Right? So Captain Stacy would be back. And this is some of the bits of what would be here. But this story where Flash is the hero and everyone's kind of taken with him. And he's destroying Reed Richards. And Spider-Man and Flash would be handling business. So it'd be basically trying to do a little bit of that story where the characters will all be stuck in this new world. Right? Where Flash, but in this world, Flash is the hero and Spider-Man is his partner. Right? And of course, Spider-Man makes short work with Doctor Doom. Flash takes care of Blastar. Right? The Fantastic Four really have no help. This is how the Fantastic Four is dealt with presently. This actually happened where Spider-Man took out all the people and helped out the Fantastic Four. This is kind of nuts, but this is to play that this is not the real world where Sue kisses Flash and she's taken with him. And she's sitting on his lap this entire time and Reed is happy driving the car. Right? And seeing all this happen, J. Jonah Jameson gets his, but then there's a moment where it doesn't feel real for a second. And Peter Parker is in a wheelchair, and we have Uncle Ben is alive, everything that he would want, right? So this is a cool sort of story, right? But they ultimately led Byrne and who's that guy? And Quesada coming at odds, right? So instead of doing a Shaper of World story, they did chapter 1 and they did the regular series. And also Byrne was also wanted I think his plan was to ink this, but for the regular series he wanted Terry Austin to ink, but Terry declined. And this basically reset up some of the things in Spider-Man's history. So instead of doing something where it'd be like it would happen now where he'd be in high school, they'd get to play for a year with Spider-Man being in high school, right? So sort of not exactly what Byrne initially pitched, and to hint some characters that'll show up later. And this was the biggest thing that kind of affected people, right? And some of this stuff there people had issue with. But to lastly say, soon after as this goes on, the art just starts to get killer in here. So if you're a critic of this, some of the art that Byrne did in this series is really amazing, right? Some of the upside down panels that he was doing, given something that you really I really thought Byrne was very straightforward in his approach, but then when he got to this stage, he kind of started pulling out all the stops with these upside down panels and whatnot to try to get sort of a spidery sense to it, right? So see, it's a bunch of cool stuff. So I'm not getting too much of that. I definitely want to go back to chapter 1 at some point. So soon after, Ultimate Spider-Man comes along, which is a reboot, and that was successful. I don't think initially it was successful. The issue 1 was successful, and then they did something weird with the print run, and then it started to sell like gangbusters. But then soon after that, when I think J. Michael Straczynski, he took over it. He did something where he brought back Gwen Stacy. Spider-Man had revealed his identity, had organic webs. All this stuff, all these things that Byrne usually talks about, like barnacles, had now accumulated on Spider-Man. So, Joe Quesada had used that idea. He said, why don't we just reboot it? And no one will know. And everyone said, no, don't do that. All this continuity, that's so DC. And then, of course, he was party to, I think it's One More Day, which led to Brand New Day. And that would be the reboot using another villain, which would be Mephisto, saying he wanted to take his marriage to save Aunt May, right? And ultimately, that's what they did. They rebooted Spider-Man. Spider-Man was basically post high school, post grad school, and all of his supporting cast was kind of backed. But then, of course, we went to the Superior Spider-Man, all that. So this is where some of the ideas that you could see in your movie No Way Out kind of came from. Like slowly trying to get to this thing where we kind of reboot everything that's in Spider-Man and that sort of stuff. So I think that's about it. So we got to touch on things like Untold Tales of Spider-Man in Chapter 1 and Ultimate Spider-Man and One More Day and Brand New Day, and now you got No Way Home, right? So that gives you a little bit of history on that stuff. Thank you. Spinner Rack out.